I know.
It's like I tend to find that with these things, I prefer sitting cross-legged with no shoes on.
Yeah, there you go.
It looks good.
Yeah.
It's very holiday vibe
Yeah,
too.
it's
Matches
perfect.
your outfit.
Yeah. Exactly.
You used to play without shoes on. Do you still do that?
No. I mean, I was generally, I was probably more inclined to wearing like sandals, you know. But yeah, over the years, I find I can land better jumps with proper footwear on. So I've opted for vertical over the feet comfort kind of thing.
Was that a Southern California guy thing, you think, or like an artist thing, or just
well, I mean, yeah,
thing?
I grew up out here, you know, so I live in a pair of rainbow sandals.
Right.
You know what I mean? I live in San Clemente, the home of the Rainbow Factory. So yeah, I mean, I think by the time I got to California, I'd say I probably was in sandals 300 days a year at least.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I started playing, it was just like, well, this is what I wear. Right. You know, I mean, there's like a great story of like one of my favorite sort of agents within the agency that I work at, and where he like sat me down one day. He's like, you can't be a rock star wearing sandals on stage, you know. And I was like, I choose to prove you wrong, you know. But yeah, I think somewhere around Jack's Mannequin, I decided to put a pair of shoes on.
Right.
Yeah, I remember seeing you at the Epicenter here
Yeah.
in Mira Mesa with something corporate, and you didn't have shoes on. I was
Yeah,
like, that's
yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I was wearing them through the winter on tours for a long time, and then I finally was like, this is not practical anymore.
Right.
Yeah, so you're in the Midwest and it's December.
That's true. Yep, that's right. For
Right
sure.
on. Well, yeah. Do you want to tell us about how you got into music originally and what?
Yeah,
what
I mean,
kind
well,
of-
there was like always a piano in my house as a kid. So I mean, even from a really young age, like 4 or 5, I remember always tinkering with the piano in our basement where we lived in New Jersey at the time.
Who played piano in the house?
My mom played. Yeah, my mom was a piano player. I mean, she like studied and took lessons as a kid,
wow.
and so I think she she always kept one in the house, and I would see her occasionally play and practice, and I had 4 older brothers and sisters, so it was just popular music was just in my home, blasting out of 3 of 4 bedroom doors. So it was I had 2 older brothers and an older sister, and then one that was close to my age. But the 3 oldest were probably middle school, high school when I was kind of like 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, so they're quite a bit older than you.
Yeah, so I was like, we were getting Madonna and U2 and like just all of like the great sort of 80s classic pop and rock music was just kind of always filtering through our house. And somewhere around I guess I was about 9 years old, we moved briefly to Pasadena from Illinois, and there was a death in our family, which was really kind of traumatic, I think, for our whole family. It's my mom's brother, and we were all very close with him. And that moment sort of coincided with a buddy's dad teaching me how to play a whole lot of shaking going on the piano. He was like in a bar band, and so he was teaching us both how to do like just like a simple little kind of Jerry Lee Lewis tune. And I remember like going home pretty much that day and taking those chords that I had learned, moving them around the piano and starting to write like my first songs.
Wow.
And it was really about the experience of losing my uncle, and I just a light bulb went off, and it was like that's all I did from that day forward was write songs. Yeah,
I had heard that you had played after the death of your uncle, but I didn't know it was based off Jerry Lee Lewis stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the song was a lot sadder than a whole lot of shaking going on, but I think it was just I learning those tunes, or learning how to play a little bit of piano. I think just gave me a vehicle to sort of process that in a way that I hadn't been able to figure out where to place that grief, I guess, in that moment. And I think it set the stage for sort of how I write and why I write, which is just to sort of process what it is that the day is bringing me and what I see in the world and try and make sense of it. And I tend to do that sitting at a piano or in between a pair of speakers.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was curious, how you have siblings in the house?
I do. Yeah.
Did they play piano also, or?
At one point, my sister Kate like my parents got us both into piano lessons when we were, I don't know, I was probably 6 and she was 7.
Mm-hmm.
It was before I had started writing, and I hated it. You know, like I was. Learning was always a tricky thing for me, you know, and I always did better if I was really interested in something and sort of taught myself and then engaged. And so my sister excelled in it for a while, but she jokes that like when I started being able to play both parts of Heart and Soul by myself is when she quit playing piano.
That's actually why I asked. I was wondering if they were if she was envious, like, hey, my little brother's playing better than me all of a sudden, you know.
My sister's brilliant, and so I don't know that was the case, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to my parents' credit, I think all of us had sort of our own thing, you know. My oldest brothers and sisters, they were really talented athletes. My sister was also, you know, my sister who's just a year older than me was a talented athlete, but also just a really brilliant mind and a great academic. And I was the one who chose music. I was like, I couldn't kick or catch a ball, and so I played piano.
There you go.
Yeah.
Picked the right one.
I know. Yeah, totally. Did you pick up lessons at all after learning that song? Or
I did, yeah. So I'd say I spent like about a year. We were only in Pasadena for like a little bit. I spent that year just writing and teach and just, you know, playing by ear and learning as much as I could. And then at one point we moved to Ohio and I was going in like the 5th grade. And I remember feeling like I had hit a little bit of a wall as far as what I could teach myself, you know? And that's when I started taking classical piano lessons. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did that for about, I don't know, 3 years or so. And I hated it then, but I to this day, I can't remember why I still kept going because my parents didn't.
They didn't force you to do it.
No, they were really supportive. And anytime I asked for something so that I could further my education or get better, they were great about that. But no, I mean, I stayed in it with her name was Beatrice Eisringenhausen at Capital.
Shout out.
At Capital University. And I'm certain she did not care very much for me. And but she taught me theory and she taught me the basics and got my dexterity up and taught me how to hold my fingers on the keys without looking like an idiot. You know? So she was really helpful. Yeah.
Did you do like recitals and stuff?
I did.
Oh, okay. Was that your first those early recitals? Was that like your first time playing in front of people?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like as soon as I started playing, I was looking for places to play. So I mean, even in 4th grade when I was writing songs, like I got a gig at the town fair playing a set of my songs. You know,
nice.
like I mean, yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and then. Yeah, so I did piano recitals, and then I also had like this amazing 5th grade teacher, Molly Davis, who she had a piano in her classroom, and so I would play in the classroom, and she would get me to. She would always make it so if there was a class or a school assembly, I'd get to play one of my songs.
Oh,
at the assembly.
wow!
So yeah, I was always kind of that kid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
you're a real go-getter.
Yeah, seriously.
Well, I also really liked performing, you know, like I think they were always kind of one and the same for me. This idea of like, you know, I made songs, I think first because it connected me to myself, you know, but I think I also felt like it was my vehicle for connecting me to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so I was always looking for those opportunities, but I did the classic piano recitals, and I'd always kind of make a deal with my teacher that if I did a classical piece, I'd get to do like a piece of my choosing, and so like
one for you, one for me.
Yeah. And she hated me for that. But like, I mean, I remember I did like November Rain, and I did Piano Man, and So it was always a negotiation on that front.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're in Ohio when you're in 5th grade.
Yeah, 5th, 6th, and 7th grade.
5th, 6th, and 7th. Yeah. And when did you start performing like with buddies and friends and stuff?
Well, I did have a band in 4th grade called Freedom.
Did you really?
Yeah, we were excellent. I mean, I remember we like took after Bon Jovi, and we had bandanas tied around.
Really?
Nice. Yeah, it was pretty great.
That's awesome.
That was I think for like one whatever the recital or the whatever you call it, whatever you like.
Yeah,
do
like a
in the
talent show or something.
Talent show or something.
Yeah.
But I'd say like my first real band was the first incarnation of something corporate.
Oh, okay.
And that would have been, you know, my I guess it would be my sophomore year of high school at Dana Hills in Dana Point.
Okay.
When I had moved to California.
So when you moved to California, you said you were in what, 8th grade?
I was in 8th grade. Yeah, we were briefly in Huntington Beach, and then ended up settling in Dana Point, which is more or less where I've lived on and off for the better part of the last. God, I mean, I can't even count anymore. 20 plus years. But yeah, so there was like a battle of the bands at our high school.
Okay.
And I had been doing like theater, like my performance thing was like I was like doing plays and things like that.
Okay.
You know, which I enjoyed, but it was still not like playing my music. You know.
Yeah. It wasn't the same thing.
Yeah, and so I saw the battle of the bands banners go up around school, and I was like, well, I'll just start a band, and you know, I've got all these songs, and so Brian, our original drummer, and Clutch, Kevin, who played bass with us, we were like sort of the original three. There was 2 other guitar players, and we signed up for the Battle of the Bands and won our Battle of the Bands at school.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of it for me. Like I kind of dropped out of theater at that point and started like really thinking seriously about like how do I, you know, keep writing and getting in front of audiences. And we played a little bit in that incarnation of the band that was called Left Here was our name, like at that point. And then the next year we formed as something corporate with Josh playing guitar and another guitar player.
And you were still in high school with something corporate started?
Yeah, my junior year of high school we started.
Wow. Yeah. And what were those early shows like? Like, where were you guys playing?
Well, it started with another Battle of the Bands. Basically, once the Battle of the Bands came around the next year, then we formed. Josh and I had been playing like a little bit and talking about like how we would want to kind of get, you know, what we thought that looked like, you know. And so he would just play acoustic guitar and I play piano in my parents' living room kind of thing. And then we were like, well, maybe we'll get like a saxophone player, dude. Like, you know, like we're just like trying to figure it out. And eventually I was like, well, why don't we call my, you know, like the rhythm section from my last band and try and get us all together and see what happens. And we had another guitar player friend who joined us and we did the Battle of the Bands again and we won that Battle of the Bands. and then we were into it at that point. So we started playing like anything we could get our hands on. So like, you know, a birthday party or, you know, we play at somebody's church or, you know, it was really just like whatever we could get to come our way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when something corporate starts really like picking up, like how did that momentum happen?
Well, it was really almost like we almost broke up because 2 of our guys were going away to school. So we had one guy, Ruben, who played guitar with us, who was going to Pepperdine, and Josh was going to Arizona State. And sort of the turning point was we threw like a farewell show for the band where we rented out. We couldn't get any venue to let us play because we didn't have a demo. We had only ever played locally. So we rented out a local playhouse, and basically the agreement was if we painted the sets for their next play, that they would let us use.
Oh, that's cool.
The theater. And I was on like student government. I was like in student government, so I conned the high school into letting me use their risers to make a stage. And we just like begged, borrowed, and steal. Brian's dad had a bunch of gear because he ran a music shop, and we threw this show, and 350 people showed up.
Wow.
And bought tickets. Like we did it all in like 2 weeks of promotion. And so I used that information as the guys were going off to college. I went to the Coach House, which was like our neighborhood haunt, where a lot of the bands, the big bands that played in our town would come through. And I said, we just did a show a mile from you, and 350 people paid. You know,
wow, yeah.
And I'd been going to them for a year, and they wouldn't let us get a gig. And finally, they said, if you can get 350 people in here, you can headline the place.
Wow. Yeah.
So I booked a show that day. I called Josh and Ruben, and I was like, can you guys come back in a month you know, and play this gig? And so, yeah, I want to say it was September of my senior year of high school. We played like our first like official like
show,
proper club date, and sold it out.
Oh my gosh.
And
Awesome.
that was it. We basically started playing that room once a month, graduated to their bigger room in Costa Mesa, I guess. It was called the Galaxy then. Now it's called the Observatory.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we pretty much worked steadily through my senior year of high school, put a record together, and were signed within a year of me graduating.
Wow.
Awesome. So that first show that you put on, 350 people, was that mostly just high school friends? Like, was that your high school just coming out in full force, or like neighboring high schools with maybe some mutual friends? Or
well, I mean, so it was a combination of things. I mean, yes, it was mostly high school kids and family friends.
But still, getting 300 high school kids to show up somewhere.
Totally. Well, and that was the thing. I mean, it's funny because even in the early days when I first brought on the guys that I brought into the band, like I was like mildly political about it. I was like, I'm like. I was not really a popular kid in high school per se, but I was like, I'm going to get popular kids to join my band. You know what I mean?
Smart, yeah.
And we all had our own group. Everybody had different groups of friends. We were all friends with each other, but we weren't all like, we weren't like, we didn't grow up together.
Yeah, it wasn't like you guys were a clique.
No,
and then started a band.
Everybody was from different grades, and we had Josh was from a different school altogether.
Oh, okay.
And
so that helps too. You get the whole other pool. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
And so I mean, when we started playing, before we started playing club dates, I mean, we would just play wherever we could, but we did start making fans. We played like the middle school, and like it made these, like little kids were becoming fans, and so it became this sort of like weird little counterculture of kids from all of these neighboring schools that would come, and eventually we sort of built like ticket networks kind of thing.
Yeah,
we'd be like, you can go for, like, we would kind of figure out who were the kids that were like really starting to tell their friends about the band and getting people to show up and be like, we'll give you a free ticket if you can just sell 5 tickets for us.
Smart. Oh, yeah.
And so we did a lot of that. And I remember at one, like kind of the culmination of all this before we got signed was we booked a gig at the House of Blues in Anaheim, like the year it opened, and sold out the Anaheim House of Blues from my parents' living room. We literally, not a ticket went to Ticketmaster. We got all 1,000+ tickets, and it was all sold by us from the house.
Oh, so people were coming to your house to buy the tickets?
We'd give them blocks of tickets.
That's awesome.
And they would go out and sell them to their friends, and so they could get free tickets.
That's so rad.
It was. I mean, I learned a lot about guerrilla marketing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
In the early days. And
testament to street team style promotion.
The truth is, I feel like it's carried through to this day because I think that's why I make a point to try and meet fans at every gig, and why I always go out after the show. And because the people that connect to your music, if you can foster a deeper connection with them or answer some questions or hang out, like, I think it breaks that, that barrier down of like, there's the stage and there's me. It's like I always want people in the show and have since we started to feel like, no, it's all of us.
Everyone's included.
Like I'm getting as much from it as they're getting from it. So we might as well be on a somewhat even playing field.
Sure.
If we can,
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of that from the early days of the Something Corporate.
Something Corporate.
Yeah.
That's cool. Once you obviously had a fan base there in Dana Point, Southern California area. So when does drive-through start knocking at the door? They just heard, there's this band at a Dana Point that's selling out House of Blues.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think, it was that. At one point, we ended up booking. We booked a show at Chain Reaction, and we had never really done. We'd always sort of like, I mean, the venues that we were playing, mostly the Coach House and the Galaxy, were a little more adult leaning, and they were like Coach House is kind of like a dinner theater. I mean, the bands we would even open for a lot of times were sort of like legacy acts, and we would be their opening act. They put us on the bill. So at some point, somebody contacted us from Chain Reaction, which was like much more in like the kind of punk and indie scene. And offered us a gig, and we took it because that's what we were doing. We'd take any gig, and I think it was John from the Chain Reaction who called Richard and Stephanie because they a lot of their bands that would be the venue that you would play in Orange County would be Chain Reaction. And so he called them and basically said, look, these guys drew, a massive audience to my venue. I'd never heard of them up until recently, and we got a call almost immediately from them because they had heard the music and wanted to sign us.
And then so they had already heard everything, and when they called you?
At that point, we had already released a like kind of like a demo. It was called Ready Break. It was a full length
album,
like 10 song record that I recorded with the guys through our friends at the Coach House in the Galaxy. They like paid to make our demo for us because
Oh,
the
wow.
owner really believed in the band. And so yeah, they heard that, and I think they had heard like Constantine on that release, and were like Richard and Stephanie were super into, like they liked my ballads, you know. And yeah, I mean, they offered us a deal on the spot. It was just like, it was instant. And we were, I mean, frankly, I didn't know anything about Drive Thru. I didn't know anything about punk music. I didn't know anything about.
I was gonna ask you about that. Wow.
No, like I was like when I was in high school, for me it was like Ben Folds 5 and Third Eye Blind and Semisonic and
I could see that.
the Heartbreakers and you know what I mean, like, you know, and so when I think they were probably used to any band being offered a deal by them
Being
jumping,
like, yeah,
you know?
like, yes.
and I was, you know, we had already been talking to Interscope at that point, and we had talked to some majors, and so I was like, well, that sounds really cool, but I've got a piano. Like, I know it's going to be expensive for us to tour. Like, we were kind of anticipating like a major label.
Yeah,
and it was where we were interested, and I think we had a little leverage at that point because the band had gotten, you know, we're selling out, you know, 1,000 cap rooms in our hometown. And so they actually brought us to MCA, which was their upstream partner.
that was like their
and
parent company almost.
Yeah, so we sort of did a deal where we could, you know, they would help do the artist development, and we would work with their bands and tour with their bands, but we had this sort of, you know, financial backing of the major, because there was just it was a behemoth to carry a piano to every show. You know, it's like not something that is inexpensive to do when you're starting out.
How did you do that early on? You just rolled it? Like, how would you get a piano somewhere?
It's the early days. We had like a open motorcycle trailer. It was just like a flatbed. And we would throw the piano on it and put a tarp over it and strap it down with motorcycle straps.
Oh my gosh.
So it was just flying behind Brian, our drummer's Explorer.
Yeah.
You know, and then after, I mean, eventually we got a trailer as a part of our deal. We got a van and a trailer, and we'd throw it in there, and we would just all. I mean, it was like 600 pounds, and we just, you know,
Muscled
get as many guys
Yeah.
around it as we could, and a lot of times we'd have to carry it up and down flights of stairs. I mean, it was,
gosh.
you know, like, you're playing some of these you know, indie kind of punk bars and stuff, and having to muscle that thing up a narrow flight of stairs. There were a couple of like
just up on a elevated stage. Just like,
there's a couple of pretty hairy sort of events with that thing.
I was gonna ask you that. Like, I would imagine like you're early on tours and stuff, showing up to a venue and you're like, I have this, like, did they have to call ahead and say, hey, like, we have a piano, like our main guy plays piano.
Well, and imagine this too. It's like, you know, it's not like we were nobody cared. I mean, half the times, even when you're a fairly decent sized artist, you can end up at clubs where people don't give a shit. You know? You know, so now here we are, barely have a draw, you know what I mean? And we're showing up with the piano. And you've got these guys like, you know, fuck you, can't do it. So I don't know if I can swear.
You can
on this.
swear,
Okay,
yeah.
Like you know, bring a keyboard, kid. You know, like we got a lot of that. You know, and it was.
I could totally see that.
You know, and it's like on one hand, like you get it, you know, but I think it was because we had the audacity to say, no, this is how we perform, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it this way.
Yeah.
And we worked so hard, and we were so deferential to the people who we played for that we were never, you know, dicks about it. But we were like, this is what we're gonna do. So like, work with us, and we're gonna make it as easy as possible. But I think it was because we had the nerve to show up on those stages, and a lot of times with bands who didn't sound like us, and in most cases who were way more aggressive, you know, and we would be, and there I'd be with this piano, you know, and I think we got a lot of respect for it, actually. You know, some people would hate us for it, but other people, you know, I think respected the fact that we cared enough about what we did and how we, you know, intended to do it, that we built a fan base pretty quickly. You know,
I think it would distinguish yourself pretty quickly too. Like in these smaller punk venues, you're used to just seeing kind of guitar rock, and then a guy just killing it on the piano, and you know,
I think
on
we
a
got,
grand piano, or you know,
I think we got by. You know, not being as good a band as we could be, or as we eventually did become, because was a visual gimmick
Right,
to some people. I mean, for us, it was just what we did. But yeah, I mean, you'd show up, opening up for like Finch or whoever, Newfound Glory or something.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it would start with like middle fingers in the air, and then eventually it became a thing where it was like, oh no, we got accepted. We were really we were fortunate that scene wrapped their arms around us, because there was really no reason they should have, but they did, and it was a really fun time.
Yeah.
So both these guys recommended I watch Dear Jack.
Oh
and
man, I'm sorry. It's a heavy viewing.
It really was. And so I watched it recently, and I felt myself getting emotional on a few of the parts. But after something corporate, you go into Jack's Mannequin.
Yeah.
But an interesting part that I wanted to ask about is there was a part in there where you're talking about writing with Tommy Lee.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you met him and how that partnership kind of started.
Well, we at the time, Tommy and I we shared a manager in common, and Tommy had heard the second Something Corporate record, North, and fell in love with the song Me and the Moon. Like he for whatever reason, he really gravitated towards that song, and I had heard that over the course of a year or so that dude, Tommy loves that, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. Like I grew up on MTV and Motley Crue, and so to me that was like amazing.
Yeah,
Home Sweet Home was probably one of the first songs I learned on piano.
Yeah, that's like a perfect one to learn.
Yeah, and I was in recording Everything in Transit at the time, and I got a call from Tommy. Like he just called my cell phone directly.
Wow.
And in class, bro, it's Tommy Lee. And it just like and I was like laughing, and he just said, I love Me and the Moon. I'm really into what you do, and I'm working on a song right now that it was an emotional song about a friend of his, I think, who lost a loved one. I think their kid had passed away, and he said, I just feel like you're the right guy for me to work on this song with. And I was totally touched by it and excited, obviously. So I shut down the studio for the day, and I rolled up to Nichols Canyon, where he was working with his producer, and he played me this. I want to say it was the chorus. He played me one of the sections of the song that he'd already started, and I thought it was great. And then I kind of hung with them and took it home and worked on it, and he loved it. And so I continued to work with him on that record I wrote maybe 3 songs on that album, and
wow,
and played all over it, and it was amazing. And then he ended up playing the drums on Everything in Transit. He was my drummer for the record.
I love it. You're like, oh, I'm actually going, and they're like, well, why don't you ask him if he'll play drums on the record? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have, but we really I really connected with Tommy. I just think he's one of the most he's such an inspired guy, and he loves music. And I think a lot of people along the way sort of their passion changes, but Tommy is just he loves all music, and he's into what's new. He's got probably hipper taste than most people half his age, and so I was just really I was totally just into his world and psyched, and eventually we didn't have a drummer. We were just cutting up loops off a tape and things like that. That's how we built the whole Jack's record.
Oh wow.
We it was all samples originally, and I liked the way it sounded, but it just needed something else, and we finally, I just got the nerve up to be like, hey Tommy, you think we can hang out for a couple of days and work on my record? I've been working on yours, and he had been listening to all my stuff up to that point and been like really into what we were doing, and so he was like, absolutely. So we went and cut. I mean, he probably played on 7 or 8 of the songs on the record and cut them all in one night.
Wow,
that's so rad. Wow.
It was a lot of fun.
Did he end up ever jamming live with you guys?
Yeah, we played with him once or twice. Yeah, he did a Viper Room gig with me. He came. I mean, we like jumped in on a song.
Okay,
that's crazy.
Yeah, it was great. He might have done another one too. but it was pretty magical.
Yeah, that's a good venue on the Sunset Strip. Viper Room, Tommy Lee playing a song.
It used to be, I used to play there a lot. It was like kind of my anytime I'd want to get ready for a tour, I'd go shed the songs at the Viper Room.
Nice. Oh, really?
Yeah.
And was that through something corporate or later on?
No, Jack's. Yeah.
Jack's?
So that was kind of the room I worked stuff out in, was the Viper Room.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a cool space. It has a vibe, and the stage is super tiny, and there's only, you can fit 150 people in there, maybe max, wall to wall, and so it felt like a pretty safe space because the people who actually managed to get in the door had to fight pretty hard.
Right. Yeah. Right, yeah.
So it was always fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
You're writing for shows and stuff now too, right? Like the sound.
It's called Soundtrack.
Soundtrack. Yeah.
So I just in October. I mean, I worked through the summer doing the score for that show. So it was a amazing creative guy, a guy named Josh Safran, who's the showrunner for that show. He was also the showrunner for Smash, which was like an NBC show that I did a bunch of writing.
Yeah.
And he called me, God, it has to be more than a year ago now, and was working on the pilot for the show he had created, and asked me if I would be interested in scoring it. Of course, I've never scored anything in my life, and but I was like, yeah, of course, that sounds great. I can do that. And yeah, the pilot got picked up by Netflix, and I spent the summer with a good friend of mine, Morgan Kibbe, who she was in M83, and she performs as White Sea now, and she's super talented, and she does compose. So I kind of was like, Morgan, do you think you'd help me do this, because I need to learn? And so and it was amazing. We sort of holed up between my studio and hers, and wrote sort of my share of the score for the show. And then there was another amazing composer guy named Jimmy Levine who also contributed to the score as well.
Is that like a total challenge for you? It's a totally different thing you're attacking there, right?
Totally. I mean, I think, look, I've sort of really conditioned myself, especially. I mean, it's been a part of my process ever since I started doing this, but in sort of the post Jax era, especially, I've sort of trained myself to say yes to things that really scare the shit out of me. That if I'm presented an opportunity that feels really daunting and I'm not sure how to complete it, usually that I say yes quickly to that. Because I mean, as long as it's not like there's no chance in hell you could pull this off, but I just have found that more often than not, it's the rooms that I'm most afraid to go into that I leave with the most inspiration and have found the most success. I writing with other people and writing for other projects, taking on tours and doing wild production ideas for touring. It's the stuff that I first say, like, how is that going to work? That end up being the most rewarding, and I tend to really connect the most with people. So yeah, I say yes to stuff all the time that I have no business being allowed to do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I figured you probably started this great organization called Dear Jack.
Yep.
And so I figured we'd ask you about that, and I just hearing about how much money you guys have raised for the younger demographic of people who have cancer. Did you want to talk about? I feel like that must make you feel really good to have raised that much money for that cause.
Yeah, I mean, I think the money is a big thing. Obviously, it makes it possible for us to do what we do. Really, to me, it's especially, I mean, the organization's been around now for, I guess we're coming in on
10 years.
Well, no, we've done 10 years of charity benefits, but I think it's about 13, 14 years we've been around. And it's been, it's gone through multiple iterations. It started really as, like, I joked, like a hedge fund for cancer charities because, I didn't have the infrastructure to implement, program nationwide, national programs for what I wanted to do. So what we would do is we would be an aggregator. So we would raise money, and then I would find charities that were doing good work. We largely initially were focused on blood cancer. I'm a leukemia survivor, so that was really close to my heart. And then sort of probably about, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years in, really started seeing this huge just this huge gap in services and awareness for adolescents and young adults. So people 15 to 39 years of age, where they haven't seen nearly any improvement in their survival ratings in 30 years, where every other demographic has grown leaps and bounds. And obviously, being that was the age that I was when I was diagnosed, I was in that sort of pocket. I started just to notice things with my recovery that I was never told about, things I wasn't aware of, post-traumatic stress, feelings of alienation, depression. These are things, and they were these common threads I was hearing over and over again from fans who had become fans of mine through their cancer journeys. And so in the last 5 or 6 years, we've really just stepped on the gas pedal. I hired an executive director several years ago who really was the beginning of the transformation of the organization from an aggregator of funds to other really worthy charities into now we have our own programming that we build and that we execute entirely with my own staff. So
it's awesome. Yeah.
We do kind of like what you would think of as like a wish giving program. It's called the Life List, a wish granting program. But it's really involved. We're with these patients and their families for up to 6 months, helping them find things to look forward to during their treatment. Whether it's sending them on a vacation or building a play set for their family in the backyard so that they don't have to be running out of the house when they're not feeling well.
Sure.
And that's been really powerful. And we also have a really amazing program called Breathe Now that's focused on survivors who are in remission and their partner advocates who sort of walked them through their cancer journey and who are so overlooked in the process. And really using that program to try and get people who are in remission back on a healthy footing as they enter a life post-cancer, which can be very tricky for young people.
Sure. I feel like that would almost be empowering retroactively almost. It's almost like you're going back and empowering maybe the feelings that you were having back then. And maybe does it seems like it might also act as maybe some therapy for maybe you doing this.
Yeah, I mean I think it took me a long time to really own the mission because I think I was still so mired in the actual experience of being a patient and a survivor. Yeah. I think now it's easier, not to say to be dispassionate about it, but to not be so caught up in what my experience was, but instead use the experience that I had and that my wife had and that our family members and friends had, and say what were we missing? What didn't happen in the process for us, or what did that was really helpful that some people don't have access to, and use that experience and use the experience of the people that we encounter every day to say how do we make a cancer journey and survivorship journey easier for young people? And that really is the core mission of what we do. And yeah, for me it is super rewarding for sure, but it also feels like I feel responsible to do it because I'm in a position that I can do it, and so I move towards the advocacy of it, and I'm certainly inspired, when I see these people that we've gotten to work with and see the impact it's had. It's a pretty amazing feeling.
Great. We were talking about it on the car ride over here. Cecilia, such a great song. It's probably the song just feels so massive and. It feels big in such a great way. And but we were wondering, because I think I've heard that you wrote that actually before Cecilia was born. Is that correct?
It was written in a handful of stages. The first 2 of the 3 stages was leading up to her birth. So I think the initial burst of inspiration in the session that it was written in was maybe 2 weeks before she was born. And it was, and you can hear it in the lyric. I mean, I think the mission of the writing process was to get away from just just doing a corny, father-daughter song, but really her not being born yet, it was a chance for me to sort of think about what are the things that I'd like to tell my daughter about who I am and where I came from, and so that was really where those verses came from, and they wrote themselves pretty quickly once we realized that's what was going on.
Yeah.
The chorus was sort of half finished up until up until maybe a month or two after she was born. And my manager, it was it was a little bit more of a nebulous, like broad chorus. It was the song was called "If I Could Fly" initially, and one of my managers kind of like ribbed me a little bit on a phone call. He's like, "Song is great, but like there are Disney songs called "If I Could Fly," and I was so mad because I was really proud of the song, and I was just like, God, and I just in passing made a comment about like, what if you like wrote a girl's name into the chorus or something, and I was just like, oh, like hang up the phone, and but of course I'm like, I'm driving from my house to the studio, having like just like spent the morning with my baby daughter Cecilia, and I was like, of course there's a girl's name I could write in this song. And I was like so mad.
Did he know the song was kind of about her? Okay,
he did, but I think he was just kind of I'm not sure if he was making fun of me, or I'm not sure what but I think he was just like, I think his point was just more like, find a way to be more specific, or find a way to just like make this more of your thing rather than just some broad titled, which is a testament to the guys who manage me, because a lot of people will tell you the opposite with popular music, like be as broad as you can be, and so I spent 2 days with James, who I wrote the song with, and who was producing the record, and we just sat at a piano for 2 days straight trying to figure out how to finish the chorus.
Wow.
And I think I remember when the words kind of finally landed, and we were just like, I'm not 100% sure what it means, but it sure sounds good, and that was that, but the song means so much to me. It's like, aside from the fact that it became the biggest song I've released, it almost makes it sweeter that it is that, but it's also so deeply personal, and it's one of my favorite lyrics that I've written. So yeah.
I do feel that some of those vague lyrics can sometimes make things seem so much bigger, because then it, everyone gets to make up their own
storyline.
Right?
Yeah, it just never worked for me that well. I think that's the thing about my music that has why probably it's taken a long time to get those songs through the gates, is because I don't enjoy writing vague music. It's like I feel like unless it says something that's so pointedly personal and specific, then it doesn't feel real to me. And so I think that's always been a struggle of mine, and in these more recent years, I feel like I found a way to sort of do both, but yeah, it's been a journey as a writer to figure out how to balance my need and the needs of the broader sort of commercial universe, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure. Did you want to go ahead and cap
our
it
last
off?
question here is, do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
I mean, you have to want it, and you have to love it, and you have to know that it is such hard work, and it never stops being hard work. I think there are a lot of people who look at the entertainment business in general, and the concept of like fame and what something looks like on a stage or sounds like on a record or on a movie screen or whatever, and they see the projection of confidence and and the art itself, but it requires an immense amount of focus and discipline, and so I say if you're moved to sit in a chair and write for hours and hours a day, and you love doing that, if you're moved to be in a car and on a plane and in a train for hours and hours a day just to do a show, and you love it and you still want to do it, then do it, but you have to love the work. I mean, and I do. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I like what I do, but there are a lot of people who want these jobs, and you have to want it just as bad and be willing to do more even, and that I think that's the thing.